Ryan said it like it was nothing. 2 days in Chicago, department conference. I'll be back before you know it. He kissed me on the forehead, threw his duffel bag in the car, and drove off like he was some kind of hero saving lives. I watched the taillights fade down our Denver street, and something in me just paused. Maybe it was the way he avoided eye contact. Maybe it was the business trip line he'd already used twice this month. I didn't say anything. At 8 months pregnant, you pick your battles, and I was too tired to start another argument about honesty. When I went back inside, his coffee mug was still on the counter, lukewarm, same spot as yesterday. The detail stuck with me for no reason. Then I noticed his travel folder on the kitchen table, the one that usually held flight itineraries, hotel receipts, and city maps. I opened it and found a gym membership card. Local, same city. I laughed, the kind of small, dry laugh that doesn't come from humor. Chicago, huh? Maybe the Hyatt downtown had suddenly added treadmills and tanning beds. I made myself some tea and stared out the window. Snow was coming early that year. Denver winters always looked calm before they got mean. I thought about texting him, just to ask if he forgot anything. But I didn't. I knew the answer already. It wasn't that I didn't trust him, I just didn't trust what he'd turned into. The man who once stayed up all night when I had food poisoning now couldn't stay home when I was about to give birth. And that silence in the house? It started to hum. The kind that creeps in when someone's lying, and you both know it but neither of you says it first. If you've ever been in that kind of silence, you know what I mean. It's not empty, it's loaded. Tell me in the comments if you've ever felt that quiet, the one that tells you something's wrong before anyone admits it. And if you love true cheating stories and revenge stories that hit a little too close to home, make sure you subscribe. There's more than one way to expose a lie, you just have to know when to stay quiet. Snow kept falling outside, and I made a note in my phone. 2 days. Chicago. Nothing dramatic, just a reminder. Sometimes the smallest notes end up meaning the most. The house stayed too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice every small sound, the clock ticking, the hum of the fridge, the wind slipping under the door. I turned on the TV just to have a voice in the room, but even the anchors sounded fake, too cheerful for midnight. Ryan had texted once that day. Long meetings. Miss you. No punctuation, not even my name. I stared at it for a while, trying to remember when he stopped using my name in texts. The tea from earlier had gone cold on the counter. I poured it down the sink and leaned on the edge, staring at the streetlights glowing off the snow. The neighborhood was asleep, but my mind wasn't. Every few minutes, I reached for my phone out of habit, then put it back down. You start to realize how addicted you get to waiting for a text, a ring, a lie that sounds just soft enough to believe. I walked to the baby's room. The walls were a calm gray, the crib already set up, and a stack of tiny blankets folded by the window. It looked perfect, like a catalog photo, except for the empty space beside me. I tried to picture Ryan standing there, smiling, holding my hand. The image wouldn't stick. It kept sliding away, replaced by something heavier distance. At the hospital, we called it emotional flatline. When something or someone stops responding, but the body keeps moving out of habit. That was our marriage now. A heartbeat on paper, nothing more. I sat on the nursery chair, rubbing my stomach, feeling small movements from the baby. Just stay in there a little longer, I whispered. We're almost ready. Saying we still felt strange. I wasn't sure who that meant anymore. The heater kicked on, and for a moment, I thought I heard a phone vibrating on the counter. I walked to the kitchen, but there was nothing. Just my imagination running laps around itself. I opened the fridge, closed it, opened it again. Nothing I wanted. When I went to bed, I left the lamp on. The glow made the room feel less empty. Ryan's side of the bed was too neat, his pillow untouched. I could smell his cologne on the sheets, cheap, overused, the kind you wear when you're trying too hard to impress someone who isn't your wife. Sleep didn't come easy. My mind kept looping through old memories, the good ones, the kind that make you doubt your own instincts. The camping trips, the nights he used to cook dinner, the way he'd talk about our future with that fake certainty people use when they already know they won't live up to it. Around midnight, I heard snowplows moving outside. The sound was distant but grounding. It reminded me there were still people out there working, keeping things clean, keeping things moving. Meanwhile, I was stuck in a house full of stillness. At some point, I found myself scrolling through his social media. He hadn't posted in weeks. Nothing suspicious, nothing obvious, just blank. The digital version of that same silence. Then I saw a small detail I almost missed. A like on a picture from a coworker. A woman. A good job hero photo of Ryan at some training event. She'd commented with a winking emoji. He'd replied with a thumbs up. Nothing incriminating, but my stomach tightened anyway. Because the worst kind of betrayal doesn't start loud. It starts with a wink and a silence. I closed the app and dropped the phone on the nightstand. My reflection in the black screen stared back, tired and sharp. I whispered, "You're not crazy. You're just seeing what's there." It's funny how lies echo. Even when no one's speaking, they hum underneath everything under the heater, the TV, your heartbeat. They don't need words. They just need space to grow. When the clock hit 2, I was still awake. The snow outside had stopped, but the air felt heavier. My chest was tight, a mix of worry and something that felt a lot like knowing. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if to remind me I wasn't alone. I placed my hand over the spot and took a slow breath. Out the window, a single car passed by, its headlights slicing through the dark before disappearing. I wondered if Ryan was in some hotel room pretending to be busy, pretending not to hear his phone ring. Maybe lying took effort. Maybe it was work for him now. The thought didn't make me sad. It made me tired. Tired enough to finally lie down, face the empty side of the bed, and close my eyes. The silence wasn't just quiet anymore, it was waiting. The first contraction hit like someone reached inside and twisted. I grabbed the edge of the nightstand to keep from falling. It was 2:47 a.m. The clock glowed red across the room, the kind of light that makes everything look like an emergency. I tried to steady my breathing the way the birthing classes taught, slow in, long out, but it didn't help much. Another contraction came, sharper, faster. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, opened Ryan's contact, and hit call. It rang longer than it should have. Then a click, and a sound that froze me where I stood. Not his voice, a woman's, laughing, breathless. Then his voice followed, low, playful, the one he used when he wanted something. "Don't stop, baby. For a second, I thought I'd called the wrong number. I looked down, double-checked the screen. Ryan Bennett, my husband. The phone slipped a little in my hand, but I didn't hang up. My thumb found the red record button almost by instinct. I stood there listening, not moving, barely breathing, while my body tightened with pain and my mind tried to catch up to what my ears already knew. The background noise told me everything: music, laughter, a faint clinking of glasses, hotel acoustics. He wasn't in Chicago. He wasn't even working. The next contraction hit hard enough to make me bend over. I pressed a hand against the wall, eyes shut, still listening to him talk between muffled sounds. My brain cataloged every second like evidence. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine. It was flat, calm, too quiet. "Ryan?" Silence. Then a fast, panicked shuffle, and the sound cut off. He'd hung up. I stood there staring at the phone, chest rising and falling, the baby inside me kicking like she could feel it too. I hit save, typed one word in the file name. Later. That's when the next contraction came, longer, meaner. My knees almost gave out. I realized I couldn't wait anymore. He wasn't coming home. He wasn't answering. I was on my own. I threw on my coat, grabbed my hospital bag from the hallway, and stepped into the snow. The air hit me like glass cold, sharp and clean. The car door creaked, the seatbelt barely fitting over my belly. My hands shook as I started the engine. The roads were empty except for the storm. Streetlights glowed through the flakes like faded halos. I drove one block, then another, gripping the wheel between contractions. The heater was slow to warm up, so I could see my own breath in the air. Halfway to the hospital, a red light stopped me at an empty intersection. I looked at the phone again. Nothing. No calls, no texts, no, "Are you okay?" Just silence. When the light turned green, I whispered to myself, Okay, just you and me now. The hospital came into view through the storm. I parked crooked in the drop-off zone, dragged my bag from the back seat, and walked inside alone. The automatic doors whooshed open, and the smell of antiseptic hit me, a smell I knew better than most. "Ma'am, are you in labor?" a nurse asked. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Water broke about an hour ago." "Where's your partner?" she asked, helping me to the wheelchair. "Chicago," I said, then caught myself. "Work trip." She nodded like she'd heard that story before. Maybe she had. The next few hours came in, flashes, the cold gel of the monitor, the steady beeping, the doctor saying, "You're doing great." I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. When it was over, they placed a small, warm weight on my chest. My daughter's first cry cut through everything, through the pain, the exhaustion, the silence that had filled the house for days. It wasn't loud, but it was alive. Pure. I looked at her face and thought, you came into this world the same way I'm leaving a marriage, through pain, through strength, and without help from the man who caused both. A nurse asked if I wanted to call anyone. I shook my head. I just wanted quiet. Later that morning, when the room was still and the baby slept in the bassinet, I unlocked my phone. The recording icon was still red, glowing faintly on the screen. I played it once, just once, and listened to what betrayal sounds like. It wasn't the words that hurt. It was how casual they were, how easy it was for him. I closed the file, attached it to an email draft, and saved it to my private folder under the subject line for later. Then I put the phone down, reached into the bassinet, and touched her tiny hand. She curled her fingers around mine with a grip stronger than I expected. Stronger than mine, maybe. The nurse came in and smiled softly. "She's beautiful," she said. "She's mine," I replied. The snow outside hadn't stopped yet, but the storm inside me had gone quiet. The room smelled like antiseptic and new beginnings. I'd been in hospitals for years, but never from this side of the bed. I knew the sounds, the beeps, the murmurs, the calm voices trying to make chaos sound routine. But that night, every sound cut deeper, because there was no one beside me to drown it out. The nurse adjusted the IV and said softly, "You're doing great, honey." I nodded, pretending to believe her. The contractions came closer together, and I focused on the rhythm. Inhale, exhale, push, breathe. The kind of focus that keeps you from falling apart. The doctor asked if I wanted someone called. I said no. It wasn't pride, it was clarity. The man who should have been here was somewhere else, busy breaking vows in a hotel bed. Every few minutes, I reached for my phone on the nightstand just to see the screen light up. No missed calls, no messages. Just the same wallpaper, me and him at the lake, smiling like we still believed in forever. When the final push came, I closed my eyes and whispered, "You don't need him. Just breathe." Oh, the baby's cry filled the room, and something inside me cracked open. Relief, pain, disbelief all at once. The nurse placed her on my chest, small and warm, with fingers that curled around mine like she'd been waiting to do that her whole life. "Do you want to call your husband now?" the nurse asked. I shook my head. "He's busy." It wasn't bitterness. It was fact. The nurse nodded, the way people do when they understand more than you said out loud. Hours passed. The room dimmed to a soft blue glow from the hallway light. I watched my daughter sleep in the bassinet beside me. Her tiny breaths were steady, peaceful, untouched by lies. I envied that peace. The pain meds finally kicked in, and everything slowed. My body felt heavy, my eyes dry. I picked up my phone again and opened the recorder app. The red dot blinked back at me, the file was still there. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts were right. I pressed play once, not to torture myself, but to remember why I was done. The sound was brief, but it was enough. A laugh, a moan, his voice, the kind of sound that used to belong to me. I stopped the playback and saved the file again, this time renaming it for later, Evidence. I didn't know what later meant yet, but it felt right. Around sunrise, snowlight crept through the blinds. The nurse came back in and checked on me. "She's perfect," she said, smiling at the baby. "Yeah," I whispered. "She's everything." The hospital intercom crackled overhead, paging a paramedic team for an incoming trauma case. I heard Ryan's division number and froze. He was out there somewhere, pretending to be the hero. The irony almost made me laugh. When the nurse left, I picked up the small pink blanket from the foot of the bed and held it close. The baby shifted in her sleep, tiny lips twitching in a dream. "I'm going to keep you safe," I told her quietly, "even if it means burning everything else down." It wasn't revenge, I felt it was focus. The kind that comes after heartbreak, when pain sharpens into purpose. By the time they wheeled me out that afternoon, the snow had stopped. The world outside looked calm again, blank and clean, like it wanted me to start over. I tightened the blanket around my daughter, adjusted my coat, and pushed through the hospital doors into the cold. No one was waiting for us. No balloons, no car seat already strapped in, no proud father taking pictures. Just me, my baby, and the Denver sky turning white with the next storm. I buckled her into the car, turned on the heater, and sat for a moment before starting the engine. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went pale. I thought about calling him again, just to hear what excuse he'd come up with this time. But then I looked at the rearview mirror, saw her tiny face reflected there, and let the thought die. I didn't need an explanation. I had proof. The drive home was slow. Streets were still covered in ice, the city still half asleep. Every stoplight felt longer than it should have. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was still on the same one I'd left for him. I didn't turn it off. Inside, the air was still cold from the night before. I laid the baby in her crib and stood there, just watching. She stretched, made a small sound, then went quiet again. I sat in the nursery chair, opened my phone one more time, and wrote a note. He wasn't in Chicago. He was in Denver. With her. And I was here bringing life into the world alone. I saved it, locked the screen, and exhaled. The silence that had once haunted the house finally felt different. Not empty, just mine again. The hospital bracelet left a faint red mark on my wrist when I took it off that afternoon. It was a reminder that I'd brought a life into the world and that the man who should have been there was a ghost in another woman's bed. The house felt colder than before. I carried the baby inside, balancing her car seat with one hand and my hospital bag with the other. She made a small sound, halfway between a sigh and a whimper, and I whispered, "It's okay, we're home." The word home sounded strange, like something I'd rented instead of built. I laid her gently in the crib, covered her with a soft blanket, and walked to the kitchen. The same coffee mug still sat where Ryan had left it, still stained at the rim, still pretending to belong to someone who didn't live here anymore. On the counter, my phone lit up. One message from Ryan. "Flight got delayed. Can't believe I missed it. How are you?" I stared at the words. The nerve it took to lie so effortlessly almost impressed me. I typed and deleted 3 replies before setting the phone down. I didn't need to say anything yet. Silence was still the sharpest answer I had. I opened my laptop and plugged in my phone. The file appeared later. Evidence, MP4. I dragged it into a new folder titled Insurance. The folder name made me laugh a little. I wasn't sure if it meant insurance for my heart or my future, but both fit. While it transferred, I scrolled through our shared bank account. 2 hotel charges, both in Denver, both from the same week. The irony hit like a joke that wasn't funny. He hadn't even bothered to hide it well. I printed the receipts, folded them neatly, and slipped them into a plain envelope. Beside them, I added the USB drive containing the recording. My hands didn't shake. They moved with the calm precision I used at work when I had to suture a wound. In the background, the baby started to fuss. I went to her room, picked her up, and whispered, "Shh, I'm here." She quieted instantly. It felt like she trusted me already. No explanations needed, no apologies pending. When she fell back asleep, I sat by the window. The snow outside had softened into a drizzle, the world half frozen but not hopeless. My reflection looked tired but not broken. That's when I heard the front door unlock. My chest tightened. Ryan stepped in, looking rehearsed. Bouquet in one hand, grocery bag in the other, wearing the face of a man returning from business. "Oh, Brown. Hey, babe," he said softly, eyes darting toward the crib. "You look good. How's she doing?" "She's fine," I said, keeping my voice flat. Did Chicago treat you well? He smiled, forced and small. You know how conferences are. Long days, bad coffee. Uh-huh. I wiped my hands on a dish towel. Where'd you stay? He blinked. The Hyatt. Downtown. Which one? He hesitated, just long enough to make the lie obvious. The one near the Riverwalk. End quote. There's no Hyatt near the Riverwalk, I said, almost kindly. But nice try. He froze, eyes flicking to the counter. I could see him trying to figure out what I knew. The silence stretched until it cracked. He forced a laugh. Babe, are you serious? You think I'd lie about a work trip? I don't think, I said. I know. He didn't ask how. That told me everything. He set down the flowers. Look, I don't know what you think you heard. I heard enough, I interrupted. The room went still. The refrigerator hummed like static between us. He tried again, softer. Julia, can we just talk about this later? You've been through a lot. You're emotional. I smiled. Don't do that. Don't use childbirth as your defense. You weren't here when it happened, remember? He looked down, jaw tight. You're being dramatic. No, I said quietly. I'm being precise. I walked to the hallway, pulled an envelope from the drawer, and placed it on the table. This is everything you left behind while you were gone. He didn't touch it. His eyes flicked between me and the envelope like it might explode. Julia, what is this? Proof, I said, of where you really were, of who you really are. He reached for it, but I stopped him with a hand gesture. Don't open it here. You'll need a drink for that. He looked at me for a long second, like he was trying to find the version of me who used to back down. She wasn't home anymore. Ryan finally exhaled, dropped his keys on the counter, and muttered, You've changed. Yeah, I said. So have you. Just not in the same direction. I turned toward the nursery as the baby stirred again, the faintest cry cutting through the heavy silence. He stood frozen, watching me walk away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around mine as I leaned over the crib. Outside, snow began to fall again, slow and steady, like the world was erasing his footsteps one flake at a time. Ryan's voice changed when he realized I wasn't going to yell. It was the first time I saw him panic without showing it. He tried to stand taller, to sound calm, to twist the truth just enough to make me doubt what I knew. That used to work. Not anymore. He picked up the flowers again, a cheap grocery store bouquet with the barcode still on the plastic. Can we start over? He said, soft, like an apology he practiced in front of a mirror. You can, I said. I already did. His jaw flexed. Julia, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Things have been stressful. I wasn't thinking straight. You were thinking straight enough to book a hotel room in Denver under your department's name, I said. So no, that's not what not thinking looks like. That's what planning looks like. He stared at me, stunned I knew that. I didn't tell him about the printouts in my drawer, the receipts, the GPS data, the phone logs. I wanted to see how far he'd go to protect his own lie. He shifted tactics. You went through childbirth alone. You must be angry, and you have every right to be. But we can fix this. I laughed, sharp and quick. Fix this? You weren't there when your daughter was born. I called you, and I heard you in bed with someone else. How do you fix that, Ryan? Glue and duct tape? He dropped his gaze. That silence again. I recognized it now. The same one from before he left for his trip. The sound of a man realizing his performance is over. He muttered, It didn't mean anything. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. That's the part that bothers me the most, that it meant nothing to you, that you could throw away a family, a marriage, a life we built, and it meant nothing. He rubbed his forehead. You're not being fair. You don't understand the pressure I'm under at work. Everyone looks up to me. I'm responsible for lives. You don't know what that's like. I tilted my head, watching him. You mean the pressure of pretending to be a hero while you're screwing someone behind your wife's back? He blinked, almost flinched. Don't do that, he said quietly. Don't make me out to be some monster. I shrugged. I didn't have to. You did that yourself. For a second, he looked smaller. Not the confident paramedic supervisor everyone admired, but just a man caught between arrogance and shame. He stepped closer. "Julia, please. You know I love you. I was just lost. It was one night. You have to believe me." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what I told myself when I first felt you slipping away. It's just one night. But nights add up, don't they?" He didn't answer. The baby stirred in the next room, a small cry that broke the standoff. I turned toward the sound, but he spoke again before I could move. "I want to be here," he said, desperate now. "I want to be part of her life." I stopped in the doorway and looked back. "Then you should have thought of that before you picked up the phone that night." He took a slow breath, then said it the one line men like him always use when they're cornered. "You're not perfect either." I almost smiled. "No," I said, "but at least I'm honest about it." He stood there, deflated. The kind of silence that follows truth has a different weight. It doesn't beg to be filled. It just sits there, final. I walked to the nursery and lifted the baby from her crib. Her warmth against my chest was grounding. She looked peaceful, completely unaware that the man who helped bring her into the world had already lost his place in it. Ryan followed quietly, leaning on the doorframe. His eyes softened for a moment, maybe realizing what he'd thrown away. "She's beautiful," he said. "She is," I replied, never looking up. He swallowed. "Can I hold her?" I didn't answer right away. Then, calmly, I said, "Not yet." He nodded, but the rejection hit him harder than anything I'd said before. His shoulders slumped, his hero act fading for good. He lingered there, as if waiting for me to invite him back into the story. But I didn't. That story was over. I laid the baby back down, tucked the blanket around her, and whispered, "We're okay." Behind me, Ryan cleared his throat, like he needed to reassert control. "Julia, I need to explain what happened." I turned, meeting his eyes. "No, you need to live with it." He flinched like I'd hit him. "I'm going to take a shower," I said simply. "If you're still here when I'm done, that's your decision." I walked past him, the smell of cheap cologne and cold air following me down the hall. The bathroom mirror fogged over while I stood under the water, letting it run too hot. It stung a little, but the sting felt real, unlike him. When I came out 20 minutes later, he was gone. The bouquet still sat on the counter, drooping like it already knew what it symbolized. I picked it up, threw it in the trash, and wiped my hands clean. Then I reached into the drawer, took out the envelope marked "Insurance," and set it in the center of the kitchen table. Not as a threat, not as a reminder, just as proof. The next morning started with silence. The good kind this time. The kind that comes after a storm passes, when nothing moves but your thoughts. Ryan hadn't come home. The house was exactly as I left it, clean, quiet, honest. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching the sunlight creep across the counter. The envelope still sat there, right where I'd placed it, unopened. A symbol, really. Proof of who I was now, someone who didn't scream or beg, just acted. The doorbell rang once. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened the door, a woman stood there holding a stack of papers and a pen clipped to a folder. "Delivery for Julia Bennett," she said. "Certified mail." I signed and took the envelope. It was from the Denver Fire Department EMS division. My heartbeat slowed. I hadn't contacted them yet, but they must have been updating emergency contact forms or something routine. Either way, the logo at the top was a reminder. That's where Ryan built his reputation. That's where the lie would hurt most. After she left, I opened the file cabinet and pulled out my small black notebook. It wasn't for journaling. It was my way of tracking reality. Every date, every charge, every lie that could be proven. I flipped through pages of neat handwriting and added a new entry. January 17, evidence ready. No confrontation until after consultation. Consultation. That meant one person, Lauren McAdams. Lauren had been my college roommate before law school changed her posture and her wardrobe. We hadn't talked in months, but I knew she'd answer. I texted her, "Need legal advice. Personal matter. Not urgent, but soon." 10 minutes later, "Come by my office at noon. Bring coffee. And whatever this personal means." At 11:30, I packed the file, the USB drive, and the printed receipts into my bag. Before leaving, I checked on the baby. She was sleeping soundly, a pacifier bobbing with each breath. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "We're just getting started." End quote. Lauren's office was inside a brick building downtown that smelled like old paper and confidence. She was waiting at the door, hair up, glasses on, a legal pad already open. "Julia Bennett," she said, grinning. "You look like someone who's about to ruin a man's week, possibly his career." I smiled faintly. "Month, maybe." "Good, sit down, start from the top." So I told her everything. The phone call, the recording, the fake trip, the hotel charges, the affair. Her expression never changed, but her pen moved fast. When I finished, she tapped the notebook. "This isn't just infidelity," she said. "If he used his department vehicle or credentials during any of it, it's misconduct. That's not just grounds for divorce, it's a violation of city ethics policy." I leaned back, absorbing it. "So, what happens if I file something?" "They open an internal investigation," she said. "It's quiet at first. No headlines, no noise. Just paperwork, questions, and eventually disciplinary action. Possibly termination, if they find misuse of public equipment. And if they don't?" She smirked. "Then he still knows they're watching." The way she said it gave me an odd sense of peace. Not the loud kind, not revenge through shouting or drama, just control. "I don't want to destroy him," I said quietly. "I just want the truth to follow him." Lauren nodded. "Then you'll need documentation, GPS records, official hours, department policies. I can help file anonymously. They won't trace it to you." She slid a business card across the table. On the back, she scribbled an address. "If you decide to do this, send everything to this email. Include dates and supporting evidence. No emotional writing, facts only." Facts only. That phrase fit me perfectly now. We talked for another hour. She outlined what would happen legally if I filed for divorce. Assets, custody, the house. Everything sounded colder than I expected, but maybe that was good. Warmth had made me blind. Before I left, Lauren asked, "You okay?" "I will be," I said. "Then do it right," she said. "Quiet, legal, airtight. The kind of revenge they can't clean up." On the drive home, the Denver skyline looked sharper, more defined. The air was biting cold, but it cleared my head. Back at the house, I opened the laptop and organized everything into a new folder labeled Official Documentation. Dates, times, photos, receipts, recording. I saved them all, checked each file twice, and then exported copies onto an external drive. As I finished, the baby monitor crackled softly. She was waking up. I walked into her room, lifted her, and felt the tiny warmth of her against my shoulder. "You and I whispered. "We don't scream. We build." The night fell early, snow whispering against the window. I made dinner, bathed her, and fed her, while the news mumbled in the background. Nothing dramatic, no confessions or apologies. Just normal. After putting her to sleep, I sat by the kitchen table again. The same chair, the same envelope of proof, now joined by a second one labeled City Ethics Compliance. I looked at both and smiled slightly. Not satisfaction, just order. The kind of order that comes when you realize revenge doesn't have to be loud to be complete. By the time Ryan came home that evening, I had everything ready. Dinner was on the stove, the lights were low, and the house looked like a postcard version of forgiveness. He wouldn't suspect a thing. He walked in wearing his uniform, the same one people in the city respected, the one that made him look like a savior. He hung his jacket on the hook, sniffed the air, and smiled. "You made pasta?" "Something simple," I said, pouring him a glass of wine. "You look tired." "Yeah," he said, sitting down. "It's been a long week." I smiled, small and calm. "I can imagine." He started talking about his day radio calls, shift changes, the kind of details that sound noble until you know who's saying them. I nodded, stirring my food, pretending to listen. My phone sat face down on the table beside my plate, the red light blinking once, recording. "You know," he said after a while, "I've been thinking, maybe we should go somewhere, Just us. A weekend. Get away from all the noise. Reconnect. Reconnect? I repeated, tasting the word. That's funny. I thought you preferred hotels closer to home. He looked up, fork halfway to his mouth. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, setting down my fork, I know exactly where you were that night, and who you were with. He froze. His eyes flicked from my face to the phone. Julia, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. When my water broke, I called you. I heard her. I heard everything. And now I know what your business trip really was. He leaned back in his chair, trying to find the right expression. Shock, guilt, maybe pity. You have to understand. No, I said. I don't. I just have to remember. The air between us went still. I picked up the folder from the counter and slid it across the table. He didn't open it right away. He just stared at it, like touching it might confirm the truth he was trying to outrun. What is this? He asked quietly. Everything you left behind, I said. Receipts, GPS data, the recording. It's all there. I thought you might want a copy before it finds a new home. He frowned. What new home? The Denver Fire Department Ethics Division, I said evenly. Lauren says they take integrity pretty seriously over there. His face changed fast, color draining, eyes tightening, the hero mask slipping. You wouldn't, he whispered. I leaned forward. You used a city vehicle to cheat on your pregnant wife. You used your badge to impress her. That's misuse of department property. And last time I checked, that's not just bad behavior, it's a disciplinary offense. He pushed back from the table, the chair scraping the tile. Jesus, Julia. Do you want to ruin my life? I met his eyes. You already did that. I'm just returning the paperwork. He started pacing, muttering to himself, the words breaking apart between breaths. I can fix this. I can explain it to them. You don't want this kind of drama. People will talk our daughter. I stood up, walked past him, and picked up the wine bottle. The difference between us, Ryan, is that you care what people think. I care what's true. He turned to face me, his voice softer now, trying one last time. I made a mistake. I panicked. You've known me for 10 years. You know who I am. I poured the last of the wine into his glass and said, Yes, now I do. He stared at me, eyes flicking with disbelief. You're not going to forgive me, are you? Forgiveness isn't part of the job description anymore. He sat back down slowly, like the weight of his own choices was finally pressing down. So what now? I shrugged. Now, you finish your dinner, then you leave. His jaw tightened. And if I don't? Then you'll get an email in the morning, I said, calm as ever. One that starts with internal affairs investigation and ends with your suspension notice. End of... He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. The version of me who cried at his excuses, who apologized for things I didn't do, that woman was gone. He reached across the table, palm open. Please, Julia, don't do this. I looked at his hand, then at the baby monitor glowing softly on the counter. You already did. He didn't say another word. He pushed his chair back, grabbed his jacket, and left. The front door closed without a sound. I exhaled, long and steady, then picked up the folder and tucked it back into the drawer. It wasn't over, not yet, but for the first time in months, I felt in control. I walked to the baby's room, stood by the crib, and watched her sleep. Her little chest rose and fell, so peaceful it almost hurt to look at. You'll never have to wonder if you're enough, I whispered. Because I'll never let anyone make you feel small. The heater kicked on, and warm air filled the room. I looked out the window at the empty street, the snow melting into clean lines on the pavement. Sometimes justice doesn't start with shouting. It starts with a folder, a quiet dinner, and the truth sitting in the middle of the table too solid to ignore. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was cold, the kind of cold that tells you winter hasn't left yet. I moved quietly, made coffee, and sat at the table with my laptop open. The cursor blinked on a blank email draft. Subject line: Anonymous report, department misconduct. It wasn't anger driving me anymore. It was precision. I attached the recording, the hotel receipt, and the GPS report. I added one line in the body of the message. A paramedic supervisor used city property and duty hours for personal misconduct. No signature, no emotion, just the facts. I sent it to the address Lauren had written on the back of her card, city.ethics@denver.gov. Then I closed the laptop and exhaled. No fireworks, no rush of revenge, just a quiet certainty, like locking a door you should have closed long ago. I made breakfast, changed the baby, and went on with the day as if nothing had happened. Because really, nothing had. At least not yet. Justice takes its time. 2 days later, Ryan showed up at the door again. No flowers this time, no fake smile, just a tight jaw and eyes that didn't know how to hide fear. "We need to talk," he said. I stepped aside, wordless. He walked in like someone visiting the scene of his own crime. He didn't sit down. He just paced. "Someone reported me. The department's doing an internal review. They have evidence, emails, GPS logs." I kept my voice even. "That must be stressful." He stopped pacing, looked at me sharply. "You did this." "I sent the truth," I said simply. "Whatever happens after that is your problem." He slammed his hand against the back of a chair, not hard enough to break it, just enough to remind me of who he used to be. "You've ruined my reputation. Do you know how hard I worked for that position?" "Yes," I said. "And you threw it away in one night." He blinked, jaw flexing. "You think they'll side with you? You think being the bitter ex-wife makes you credible?" I didn't flinch. "I don't need to be credible. The evidence speaks for itself." He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "You're cold, Julia." "No," I said quietly. "I'm calm. There's a difference." He looked like he wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. He ran a hand through his hair and muttered, "They've suspended me pending review. They're checking the vehicle logs and—" He stopped, realizing he'd said too much. "So you use the department car for your hotel visits," I said. "That'll make the paperwork easier." He glared at me. "You're enjoying this." I shook my head. "Not at all. But I am appreciating the symmetry." His voice cracked. "You're destroying my life." "No," I replied, meeting his eyes. "You just didn't expect me to stop protecting it." He stood there for a long moment, chest heaving. Then he said, softer, almost pleading, "Julia, please, just withdraw the complaint. I'll quit the job. I'll leave quietly, whatever you want." "I want accountability," I said. "And you don't get to negotiate that." End of 40. The silence between us stretched, long and final. He looked around the house like a stranger, like he was memorizing a home that no longer belonged to him. "You'll regret this," he said finally. "I already did," I answered. He didn't argue again. He walked to the door, opened it halfway, then stopped. "You're not the woman I married." I smiled faintly. "Good. She deserved better." The door shut, and the sound was cleaner than any apology could have been. That night, I rocked my daughter to sleep while the snow began again outside. The rhythmic creak of the chair was the only sound. The phone buzzed on the counter, but I didn't move to check it right away. When I did, it was a message from Lauren. "Internal Affairs acknowledged receipt. They're investigating. Keep calm. Don't contact him again directly." I texted back. "Understood." Then I turned off the phone and held the baby closer. Her breathing was slow and steady, her tiny hand gripping my shirt like she already trusted I wouldn't break promises the way her father did. Days passed quietly after that. The world didn't explode, it just shifted slightly. Word spread through the department, slow but steady. A review, an ethics issue, whispers of suspension. People didn't say much to me, but I could feel the way their eyes lingered when I walked by the grocery store or the post office. Ryan tried calling once. Then again, then stopped. I didn't answer any of it. Silence was my new language. A week later, Lauren forwarded me an update. Supervisor Ryan Bennett, placed on administrative leave pending formal disciplinary hearing for misuse of department property. The words were clinical, cold, and perfect. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the snow melt into the gutters. No victory speeches, no celebrations. Just a stillness that finally made sense. Justice didn't roar. It whispered. I went to bed early, the baby monitor glowing beside me. Her quiet breathing filled the room, and for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming. By the time the court date arrived, Denver had started to thaw. Patches of grass peeked through melting snow, and the streets finally looked less like ice and more like endings. I parked in front of the courthouse with a steady heartbeat. No nerves left, just a clean, quiet resolve. Inside, the hallway smelled like paper and fluorescent lights. A clerk waved me toward the courtroom. Ryan was already there, sitting beside his lawyer. He looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the suit. Maybe it was the weight of consequence, but either way, the man who once filled every room now seemed to blend into the furniture. His lawyer nodded politely as I took my seat across from them. Mine, a calm woman named Elise Porter, placed a thin file on the table and whispered, "We'll be fine." Ryan didn't look at me right away. He stared at the table, tapping one finger like he was timing his excuses. When he finally glanced up, his face held that rehearsed expression of regret. Not remorse regret. There's a difference. Regret is for getting caught. The judge entered, and everyone stood. He was an older man with the kind of voice that made people listen the first time. "We're here to finalize the dissolution of marriage between Julia Bennett and Ryan Bennett," he said, glancing at the file. "Both parties present?" "Yes, Your Honor," Elise answered. The proceedings were brief at first. Routine questions, asset divisions, property listings, my name on the house, my account for the child, his debts. Elise handled it all with quiet precision. Ryan's lawyer objected once or twice, mostly for show, but the judge waved him off. Then came the moment that wasn't on the form. The part where truth had to step forward. Ryan's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges mistakes were made, but we ask for leniency in the division. He has suffered professional damage beyond what this court can measure." The judge looked at him, unimpressed. Professional damage caused by his own conduct? The lawyer hesitated. "Circumstances, Your Honor?" The judge turned to Ryan. "Mr. Bennett, is there anything you wish to say?" Ryan stood, buttoned his jacket, and cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I made choices I regret deeply, but I love my wife. I love my daughter. I just want to be part of her life." The judge nodded, then turned to me. "Mrs. Bennett?" I stood. My voice was steady. "Your Honor, when my water broke, I called my husband for help. Instead, I heard another woman on the line. He wasn't at work. He wasn't on a trip. He was in a hotel room while I was alone, giving birth to our child. He's asking for leniency, but leniency requires honesty, and there hasn't been a single moment of that since." The room went quiet except for the soft shuffle of papers. The judge leaned back, studying me for a long second. Then he said, "You may sit, Mrs. Bennett." Ryan looked like he wanted to speak again, but the judge cut him off. "No, I've heard enough." "Oh?" He flipped through the paperwork, signed 2 pages, and said, "Custody is granted solely to the mother. The house remains in her name. The husband will have no visitation until he completes an integrity review with the department's counseling division." Elise whispered, "That's everything." But I was already looking at Ryan. His hands had dropped to his sides, his mouth slightly open. He looked like someone who'd finally heard the sound of a door closing for good. The judge gathered his notes. "Marriage dissolved. This court is adjourned." The gavel hit the wood. One sound. Final, clean, absolute. I turned to leave, but Ryan called out, his voice breaking in a way I hadn't heard before. "Julia." I stopped but didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am." I looked back at him once. "I don't need it fixed," I said. "I just need it finished." Outside, the air was bright, cold, and oddly new. I stood on the courthouse steps, watching people rush by with coffee cups and briefcases, each living some version of their own story. The world didn't stop for mine. That was the point. Elise joined me at the bottom of the stairs. "You handled that better than most," she said. "I've had practice," I replied. She smiled. "You're free now. What's next?" I looked up at the sky, pale blue and wide. "Peace," I said simply. "Just peace." She nodded, squeezed my shoulder, and walked away. I stayed there a little longer, breathing in the cold air, feeling it fill my lungs. For months, everything in my life had been noise arguments, lies, crying, hospital monitors. Now it was quiet. Just the sound of cars and wind and life moving forward. When I got home, I picked up my daughter from her crib. She giggled, reaching for my face, her eyes bright like she hadn't seen a bad day yet. "You and me," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "We're free now." I didn't look back at the door, not at the empty ring dish on the counter or the quiet phone on the table. The past had finally been filed, stamped, and closed. And that silence I'd once hated, the one that used to mean loneliness, now felt like freedom itself. The first week after the divorce felt strange in its simplicity. No shouting, no explanations, no messages waiting to be answered, just stillness. I'd spent months living in reaction to someone else's choices, and now every sound in the house belonged to me and my daughter. The baby monitor blinked on the counter while I packed up old things, his clothes, his tools, anything with a smell I didn't want lingering. I boxed it all neatly, labeled it Ryan in black marker, and set it by the door. There was no hate left, just order. When the email came from Lauren that afternoon, I was feeding the baby. The subject line read, "Case closed, disciplinary action confirmed." I opened it with one hand while holding the bottle with the other. Denver EMS confirms Ryan Bennett has been officially demoted and placed on 6 months unpaid suspension for misuse of department resources and violation of conduct policy. Investigation concluded. I stared at the words for a long moment. No satisfaction, no rush of victory. Just the soft understanding that truth has its own schedule. Later that evening, I took a walk with the stroller. The sidewalks were clear, the city glowing in the quiet after winter. I passed the fire station where Ryan used to work. The bay doors were open, and a few paramedics were cleaning their rigs. One of them noticed me, nodded, and looked away fast. I didn't blame him. Some truths don't need repeating. They echo on their own. Back home, I lit a candle on the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a new document. The title, "The Call at 3 a.m." It wasn't a letter or a rant. It was something else, an idea. I started writing about that night, about the silence, the phone call, the birth, the way women are told to hold everything together, while the men who break it get sympathy. The words came fast, cleaner than I expected. Within a week, I turned those notes into a small blog post. I didn't use names or cities. Just a story that started with, "He said he was on a business trip." I believed him until the phone answered. I posted it quietly, no tags, no photos, then went to bed. 2 days later, the comments started showing up. Women from everywhere, California, Texas, Ohio, writing things like, "I went through the same thing. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. You're not alone." It wasn't viral. It was real. And real was enough. I wrote more. Not revenge pieces, not exposés. Just stories about finding calm after betrayal, about rebuilding from the ground up. People called it brave. I called it therapy. One night, while editing a post, I paused at the sound of my daughter's laugh from the other room, sharp, innocent, and unbothered by the past. It reminded me that healing doesn't need an audience. It just needs time. When I checked my email later, there was a message from someone named Mara, a social worker in Illinois. "I read your story. I run a small support group for women recovering from betrayal and emotional abuse. Would you consider sharing your writing with them?" I smiled. The call at 3 a.m. had done more than I expected. It connected the dots between pain and purpose. So I said yes. I sent her a short essay titled, "Quiet Doesn't Mean Weak." It ended with one line that had become my truth. "The best revenge is living a life so peaceful, they can't believe it's real." A week later, she emailed back, saying the women in her group read it out loud together and cried. That was the first time I let myself cry too, not because I was sad, but because something in me finally loosened. The next morning, I woke up early and made pancakes. The house smelled like vanilla and warmth. The baby babbled from her high chair while I flipped the second batch. I realized it was the first morning in a long time that didn't start with anxiety or resentment, just quiet joy. I carried her outside, wrapped in a blanket, and sat on the porch with my coffee. The neighborhood was still asleep. Birds had started coming back, their calls soft against the cold air. There, between the sunrise and the sound of her breathing, I thought about how people think revenge is about hurting back. But it's not. It's about creating a world they can't touch anymore. That night, I checked my blog again. One of the new comments read, "I left my husband today. Your story gave me the courage." I didn't know her name, but I whispered, "Good for you," into the quiet. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and went to bed with the window slightly open. The wind outside was calm, the air clean. It wasn't the sound of revenge. It was the sound of life continuing on my terms. Spring came to Boulder the way forgiveness never does, quietly, without asking for permission. The snow melted into the creek behind the house, and mornings started to smell like rain instead of regret. I'd learned to live by the rhythm of small things: the kettle whistling, the baby's laugh, the creak of the porch chair when I rocked her to sleep. Her name was Grace. She was walking now, wobbly steps, determined eyes. Every time she fell, she got back up with a tiny grunt that made me smile. That kind of persistence runs in the family. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house, with pale blue shutters and a yard full of dandelions. I kept meaning to mow them, but somehow their defiance felt poetic. I didn't need perfection anymore. I just needed peace. My days were full in a way that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with rebuilding. Between feedings, naps, and part-time nursing shifts at a local clinic, I worked on the call at 3 a.m. It had grown beyond a blog now. Hundreds of women writing in, sharing their own stories, sending gratitude in place of gossip. Some called it healing. I called it truth in plain clothes. One message came from a woman in Tennessee. "My husband was a firefighter too. He lied, cheated, then made me think it was my fault. Reading your story made me realize I wasn't crazy, I was just married to a coward." I read that one twice, then replied, "You weren't crazy. You were kind. That's rarer than people think." Sometimes I wondered if Ryan ever read any of it. Probably not. He never liked facing mirrors. It had been nearly a year since the divorce when I got the call from an old coworker at Fairmont General. "You won't believe this," she said. "Ryan's been suspended again. Internal review this time. They found inconsistencies in his reports." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Karma has its own paperwork department. That night, while Grace slept, I turned on the news. A small headline scrolled across the local station. "Paramedic supervisor, demoted following ethics investigation." His photo flashed for 2 seconds, tired, older, eyes hollowed by the weight of exposure. I didn't feel joy or anger, just distance, like watching the weather in a city you used to live in. I turned off the TV before the segment ended. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was earned. I poured myself a cup of tea and stood by the window, looking out at the dark yard. The porch light glowed on the swing set I'd bought secondhand. A faint wind moved through the trees. Grace stirred in her room, a soft sigh through the baby monitor. It hit me then, not the memory of betrayal, but the realization that it no longer mattered. What he did, what he lost, what he regretted, it all existed in a world I no longer belonged to. People talk about closure like it's a door you slam shut. It's not. It's a quiet walk away from the house while it still stands. I sat at my desk, opened a new draft on the blog, and began to write. He lied about Chicago. I found out. But what mattered wasn't the lie, it was what came after. He broke something. I rebuilt it. He lost control. I found peace. And in the end, that's what revenge really is. Not payback, but progress. I read the paragraph aloud once, then smiled and hit publish. Before bed, I checked on Grace one more time. She was sprawled across her crib, one tiny hand clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her breathing was even, peaceful, the kind of peace no courtroom or apology could ever give me. I brushed a curl from her forehead and whispered, "You'll never need to earn love. Not from me." Then I turned off the light. In the morning, sunlight poured through the curtains, warm and soft. I made pancakes her favorite, and played music while we ate. She smeared syrup on her face, giggling like the world had never known heartbreak. Maybe hers never would. That thought was enough. After breakfast, I stepped onto the porch with my coffee. The mountain air was crisp, carrying that early spring scent of thawed pine. I sat down, wrapped the blanket around my shoulders, and watched Grace chase a butterfly through the yard. Somewhere in Denver, Ryan was probably filling out forms, signing statements, trying to explain away another mistake. Maybe he thought of me sometimes, or maybe I was just another name in a file labeled, "What went wrong?" Either way, it didn't matter. The distance between who I was and who I'd become wasn't measured in miles, it was measured in peace. The butterfly landed on Grace's shoulder, wings bright against her little blue dress. She looked up at me and laughed. And in that small, ordinary sound, everything felt right. He lied about Chicago, but I built a life he'll never reach again. If this story spoke to you, take a second to leave a comment below. Tell me what part hit home for you. And if you love cheating stories, revenge stories, and real stories about husband betrayal and strength, make sure to subscribe. There's always another story worth hearing, and sometimes the quietest ones are the most powerful.